Nearly 5,000 years ago, in the cradle of civilization along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the ancient Sumerians inscribed the first tales of gods and mortals onto clay tablets. Among these stories, one of the most enduring and haunting is the tale of the descent of Inanna, a narrative as old as written language itself. This story, carved in cuneiform script, was etched into the very fabric of human history around 2100 BCE, though its roots likely stretch even further back in time, carried through the oral traditions of early Mesopotamian culture. The tale was uncovered by archaeologists in the ruins of the ancient city of Nippur, located in modern-day Iraq. Nippur was a significant religious center in Sumer, home to the great temple of Enlil, one of the chief deities of the Sumerian pantheon. During excavations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, researchers unearthed a trove of clay tablets buried beneath layers of sand and time. These tablets, though fragmented, revealed the myths, prayers, and rituals of a civilization long forgotten by the world. Among the most remarkable finds was a series of tablets detailing the journey of Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, into the shadowy depths of the underworld. Written in Akkadian, a Semitic language that was the lingua franca of the time, and in Sumerian, the language of the priests and scholars, these tablets have since been meticulously pieced together by scholars. The process of reconstruction has been painstaking, requiring not only the physical restoration of the broken tablets, but also the translation and interpretation of the ancient texts. The tale of the descent of Inanna is a window into the ancient Sumerian understanding of life, death, and the divine, a story that resonates with the human experience of mortality, power, and the unknown. As you journey through this story, remember that these words were once whispered in the darkness of temples, spoken by priests who believed that in telling these tales, they were not merely recounting history, but invoking the very presence of the gods. In the dust-choked streets of Uruk, where the sun's harsh gaze bleaches the earth and the scent of burnt offerings clings to the air, the people whispered of Inanna, the queen of heaven and earth. She was the goddess of love, war, and fertility, capricious, beautiful, and terrifying in her might. Her temples were adorned with gold. Her priests and priestesses whispered prayers that shaped the fates of men. Yet, in the heart of her power, a shadow stirred. A shadow born not of mortal fear, but of the gods themselves. The tale begins not with triumph, but with a journey. A descent into a place where the living should not tread. For Inanna, proud and radiant, sought something that lay beyond her dominion. She desired to know the mysteries of the underworld, the land of no return, ruled by her sister, Ereshkigal, the queen of the great below. What drew Inanna to this dark place? Some say it was ambition, the desire to conquer even death itself. Others whisper that it was grief, a longing to understand the sorrow that clung to the souls of mortals. But the truth, as always with the gods, was far more complex. Before her journey, Inanna prepared herself, donning her most powerful regalia. She adorned her head with the shugura, the crown of the steppe, its points sharp and gleaming like the rays of the sun. Around her neck, she placed the lapis lazuli beads, shining like the deep blue of the heavens. She wrapped herself in a robe of celestial cloth, and upon her chest, she placed the breastplate of power, impenetrable and shining. At her wrist, she clasped golden bracelets, and in her hand, she held the measuring rod and line, symbols of her divine authority. Lastly, she fixed her gaze in the mirror of life, where the reflection of her beauty, potent and unmatched, stared back at her with a confidence that bordered on hubris. Inanna's journey began at the gates of the underworld, 7 in total, each guarded by an enigmatic force. She called out to the first gatekeeper, Neti, with the voice of thunder, demanding entry. But the underworld is a place where the rules of the living do not apply. Here, Inanna's power, her beauty and her will counted for nothing. Neti, loyal to his mistress Ereshkigal, relayed the message to his queen, who, in her darkened chamber, received it with cold contempt. Ereshkigal knew well the pride of her sister, and so she devised a test, a series of humiliations that would strip Inanna of everything she held dear. As Inanna passed through each gate, one by one, she was forced to relinquish a piece of her divine armor. At the first gate, she surrendered her crown, the symbol of her sovereignty over the heavens. With every step deeper into the earth, her regalia was taken from her. The beads from her neck, the breastplate from her chest, the bracelets from her wrists, and the robe from her body. By the time she reached the seventh gate, Inanna stood naked, stripped of all that had made her a goddess. Here, in the land of the dead, she was no more than a soul, trembling before the vast emptiness of Ereshkigal's realm. In the great hall of the underworld, Ereshkigal waited. Unlike her sister, Ereshkigal was a figure of shadows, her beauty cold and stern, her eyes deep pools of endless night. She was the embodiment of death, the inevitability that even the gods could not escape. When Inanna stood before her, naked and vulnerable, Ereshkigal's lips twisted into a cruel smile. Here, Inanna's power was nothing. Here, she was subject to the same laws that governed the dead. Inanna, once radiant, was judged and found wanting. Ereshkigal's decree was swift and merciless. Inanna was to die. Her body was hung on a hook in the underworld's most desolate chamber, left to rot as a grim reminder of the price of arrogance. The image of Inanna, once so powerful, now reduced to a lifeless corpse, is a scene of unimaginable horror. Her flesh decayed, her eyes hollow, her beauty, so celebrated in life, now a ghastly mockery of itself. The very earth seemed to shudder in response, for the Queen of Heaven was no more. Yet this was not the end of the tale, for even in death, Inanna had allies. In the world above, Nippur, her faithful servant, waited anxiously for her mistress's return. When Inanna did not reappear, Nippur followed her instructions, visiting the temples of the gods to beg for her return. She wept and tore her garments before the gods, Enlil, Nanna, and Enki. But only Enki, the god of wisdom and magic, took pity on the fallen goddess. He created two creatures, neither living nor dead, fashioned from the dirt beneath his fingernails. These creatures were sent to the underworld, carrying the food and water of life to revive Inanna. The journey of these creatures was fraught with peril. The underworld was a place of despair, where the cries of the damned echoed through the darkness, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. Yet they pressed on, undeterred by the horrors that surrounded them. When they reached Ereshkigal's chamber, they found her in a state of anguish. Though she was the queen of the dead, Ereshkigal was not immune to pain. She wailed as if the weight of the underworld itself pressed down upon her, her cries shaking the very foundations of the earth. The creatures, small and insignificant, mirrored her suffering, and in doing so, earned her favor. Moved by their empathy, Ereshkigal granted them a boon. They asked for the lifeless body of Inanna, and surprisingly she agreed. With the food and water of life, they revived Inanna, who gasped back into existence, her eyes wide with the terror of one who has seen death and returned. But the laws of the underworld are absolute. No one, not even a goddess, could leave without a replacement. For every soul that departed, another had to take its place. And so, Inanna ascended, but her mind was shadowed by the knowledge of the sacrifice that would be required. When she returned to the world above, she found that life had continued in her absence, and her place had been taken by another, Dumuzi, her lover. The return of Inanna to the world above was not a joyous occasion but a somber reminder of the price paid for her hubris. As she emerged from the darkness of the underworld, the light of the sun seemed to burn her skin, a cruel reminder of the warmth she had once taken for granted. The people of Uruk rejoiced at her return, but Inanna's heart was heavy with the knowledge of what she had lost and what she had sacrificed to reclaim her place among the living. Inanna, once radiant and full of life, was now shadowed by the memories of the underworld. The haunting images of her own corpse hanging lifeless on the hook and the cold, pitiless eyes of her sister Ereshkigal lingered in her mind. Yet, she had survived the journey no mortal could ever hope to endure. But the laws of the underworld were not so easily defied. For Inanna to walk among the living again, another life was required in her stead. A soul to take her place in the realm of the dead. Dumuzi, her beloved, was chosen by the gods to pay this price. The decision was not one of fate or destiny, but a consequence of Inanna's actions, a balance that had to be maintained. Dumuzi, unaware of the doom that awaited him, was seized by the Gala, the demons of the underworld, who came for him without warning. Their hands were cold as the grave, their faces blank, devoid of any semblance of mercy. As they dragged him toward the gates of the underworld, Dumuzi's cries of anguish echoed across the fields and forests, a haunting wail that would forever linger in the minds of those who heard it. Inanna watched, her face expressionless, as the man she loved was torn from her grasp. She knew that his suffering was necessary, that the balance of life and death required such sacrifices. But knowing did not lessen the pain, nor did it ease the weight of the guilt that settled in her chest. The love she had once felt for Dumuzi, a love as deep as the ocean and as bright as the stars, was now a burden she would carry for all eternity. In the underworld, Dumuzi was greeted by Ereshkigal, whose cold eyes reflected none of the warmth that Inanna had once known. Here, Dumuzi was bound in chains of shadow, his body bent under the weight of his new existence. The underworld was a place of despair, where the air was thick with the stench of decay, and the walls echoed with the screams of the damned. Here, Dumuzi would dwell for half the year, a cycle of death and rebirth that mirrored the very seasons. During these dark months, he would remember the light of the sun, the warmth of Inanna's touch, and the life he had once known. But these memories would offer no solace in the cold, lifeless realm of the dead. But for the other half of the year, Dumuzi would be allowed to return to the world above. His time in the underworld was a cruel reminder of the fragility of life, a punishment for the love he had shared with a goddess. Inanna, too, would feel the weight of his absence, the coldness of the underworld clinging to her like a shroud. She would walk among her people, her face a mask of serenity, but her heart would be heavy with the knowledge of the suffering she had caused. Though she had returned from the underworld, a part of her had remained behind, bound forever to the shadows. And so, the cycle continued, a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death, between the gods and mortals. The story of Inanna's descent became a cautionary tale, a warning to those who would seek to challenge the natural order. It was a story told in hushed tones around the fires of the night, a tale that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. For in the shadows of the night, the underworld was never far away. The gods, with all their power and might, were not immune to the darkness that lurked at the edges of existence. And in the end, even they would be forced to confront the inevitability of death, the inescapable pull of the underworld that waited for all who dared to tread its path. The tale of the descent of Inanna is more than just a myth. It is a reflection of the fears and uncertainties that have haunted humanity since the dawn of time. It is a reminder that no matter how powerful we may become, no matter how much we may conquer, there are forces in this world that are beyond our control. The underworld, with its shadows and despair, is a place that none can escape, a place that waits patiently for all, even the gods. As the fires of the funeral pyres burn and the incense of offerings rises to the heavens, the people of Uruk whisper her name. For they know that even in the light of day, the shadows of the underworld are never far away. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, had faced the darkness and returned, but she would never be the same. Her journey had left its mark, a shadow that would forever linger at the edges of her consciousness, a reminder that the darkness is never truly gone. It merely waits, lurking at the periphery of light, ready to reclaim what is rightfully its own.